L'habitude de parler en français à l'IFPRI. Alors, c'est
At IFPRI, so this is a little bit confusing, but anyhow, hello to everybody. The only little detail is that English is on channel 1, and French is on channel 2. Mr. K is going to start out with his presentation right away. No, French in fact is 3 and not 2. Excuse me. French is on channel 3. So Mr. K is going to start out with a little video. The video will be in English. And then he is going to start with the presentation. After that, you will have the possibility to ask questions. We are going to have the interpreting, so you can ask your questions in English or in French, no problem. So we will start with Mr. K. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of your help. Thank you for having come to this conference. I would like to thank IFPRI for this wonderful attention you pay to the Senegal, to the country of Senegal. In August, when you invited us, we were so excited to be part of this event, because we know that this event only happens once a year, and we work as leader in the field of the nutrition, just as Mr. Forman did. And your father, the work he did, we can see it on an international plan. And this work your father did really stands out everywhere in the world, and the political actors, the political stakeholders, they underline the importance of nutrition, especially for the children who haven't reached the age of 5 years yet. Dr. Forman focused on this work, and we are very, very happy today to be here to honor him and his work. So our objective today is to share with you the experience of Senegal. First, we would like to give you a little overview of what is happening in Senegal with the implementation of nutrition policies. Then we will have a PowerPoint presentation where we are going to present lessons learned and to show you the prospects and the challenges we have in front of us for the next 5 years. If you allow, I would like to invite you to see this little video where you will have a little idea of what is happening nutrition-wise in Senegal.
Contributes significantly to poverty reduction. Strategic importance in achieving the objectives of the Millennium Development Goals, especially Goal 1, which aims to reduce by half extreme poverty and hunger by 2015. Today, despite an overall positive nutritional status throughout the world, acute and chronic malnutrition continues to plague the African and Asian continents. In Senegal, the nutritional status of the population is evolving favorably, even though it remains a concern in some areas. And according to the Lancet, Senegal has the lowest malnutrition rates in West Africa. This reflects the commitment of the government of Senegal for nutrition. The commitment is embodied by the establishment of an effective institutional mechanism called the Unit for the Fight Against Malnutrition, known as CLM. In the same dynamic, the Senegalese government has placed the issue of nutrition at a strategic level, and as such it ranks high in national agendas, in this case the Economic and Social Policy Document, DPES. Created by decree and overseen by the Prime Minister, CLM is the expression of the political will of the government of Senegal to address efficiently the issue of nutrition. It is composed of ministers, local elected officials, and members of civil society. Its mission is to define the national policy on nutrition and ensure implementation of programs. It should indeed be noted that the fight against malnutrition is based on a multi-sector approach, which includes several sectors such as agriculture, water, education, commerce, industry, and health. To date, CLM is implementing several projects or programs built on proven cost-effective interventions and which take into account the targets and windows of opportunity. The Nutritional Enhancement Program supports activities of community nutrition in partnership with the World Bank, UNICEF, and the World Food Programme, WPF. The project of universal salt iodization, which supports the iodization of salt for small producers in partnership with Micronutrient Initiative, World Food Programme and UNICEF. The NESA project, Child Nutrition and Food Security, which promotes the improvement of food security and nutrition in the highly vulnerable areas with the support of the Spanish government, MDG Fund, UNICEF, WFP, UNESCO, FAO, and WHO. The Social Transfer Project, NETS, is a rapid response to mitigate the negative impacts of the crisis. The Social Transfer Project, NETS, is a rapid response to mitigate the negative impact of crises, including rising food prices on young children in vulnerable households. This thanks to the support of World Bank, as well as the expansion and intensification of existing components of the NEP and the introduction of a new component on social transfers focused on the child. The program for the enhancement of fortification is designed for the enrichment of oil and flour with vitamin A and iron. It supports industry partners to upgrade and adapt their production chain and set up mechanisms for the monitoring and evaluation to ensure the quality of the process of fortification. This program includes strong communication and social marketing activities to promote the concept of fortification among populations. The main partner of the program is the Global Alliance for Improving Nutrition, or GAIN, which is supported in its work by Helen Keller International. Today, the positive evolution of the nutritional situation of the country is the fruit of the harmonious convergence of different interventions towards a single goal, to significantly improve the health of children from 0 up to 5 years old and that of pregnant and breastfeeding women. The CLM is present at the national level and has over 1,000 community sites located in 313 communities, including 223 rural communities of the 14 regions in the country. As part of its mission, CLM relies on a national executive board, which manages programs and projects. The NEB is the unit for central coordination, management, and implementation of programs. At the national level, it works with the various ministries through their decentralized services. To ensure proper implementation of its interventions and thus offer local services to people in partnership with other actors in the field, 3 regional executive offices have been created. They cover 3 geographical areas: Central, South, and North. The REO is related to the local authorities, which in turn are bound contractually with the community implementing agencies for concrete actions aimed at the target. CLM provides the mobilization and coordination of a critical mass of stakeholders to ensure the scalability of its operations. This coordination is based on a management system whose driving principles are to plan, to define processes, to monitor, and to analyze. Planning is an imperative at both strategic and operational levels. It is achieved through developing national strategic plans, setting out a framework of results and annual action plans for specific activities to be implemented, budgets and time frame. The local action plans focused on outcomes and set in the project documents are prepared for local government. They also serve as framework for the planning done at the community level. The adoption of results-based management involves the development of appropriate tools to keep the links between the process and the outcome. Thus, the operation of the program is facilitated by the development of an implementation guide based on the approach process. It develops the autonomy of each participant, facilitating communication, and helps maintain a process of continuous improvement. The mechanism for monitoring and analyzing activities at the community level helps to measure and analyze different aspects of the performance of the partners involved. It can also measure the impact of interventions through surveys and impact studies. It can also measure the impact of interventions through surveys and impact studies. In its internal operations, CLM has developed a system of administrative and financial management which combines security, transparency, and accountability in the areas of procurement, financial management, and internal control. Furthermore, CLM goes through a yearly audit according to international standards. Since 2001, the strong political will of the government of Senegal, combined with the renewed confidence of partners and the relevance of the program approach, allowed CLM to achieve significant results in its areas of intervention. This effective action has allowed CLM to receive in 2010 the Alpha Award from the Ministry of Economy and Finance of Senegal as the best project or program team out of a pool of 700 projects. Ultimately, CLM aims to ensure that children and mothers of our country fully enjoy their fundamental right to an adequate nutritional status.
Thank you. It was the first.
Merci, c'était la première partie. Je suis désolé.
C'était donc la première.
So this was the first part of the presentation. We'll continue now to see what are the lessons that we can learn from our experience and project over the next 5 years in terms of the challenges that we have to meet. So we have realized that for Africa, the evolution of malnutrition in Africa, well, there's a stagnation of chronicle, and since 1990, this is the benchmark, the landmark in terms of the countdown for the NGOs. So unlike for the Asian continent and Latin America, where we can observe less malnutrition, on the other hand, in Africa, there's stagnation. But Senegal is different. Because between 90 and today, we've observed a lowering of chronic malnutrition. So we are an exception in that regard, despite a weak economic growth, a rather precarious situation. Nonetheless, we achieve results when it comes to struggling against malnutrition and present a nutritional situation that is coming down. At the same time, we see that malnutrition is stagnating in India, whereas the economic growth is experiencing a rather satisfactory situation with a growth between 6 and 7%. So it enables us to think that economic growth is not enough to improve the nutritional situation in our countries. So what happened in Senegal? And what can we learn from the situation? We'll try to answer these questions as first institutionalization of nutrition, what have we done? And now in terms of the platform implementation. And third, we'll discuss our prospects for over the 5 next years in terms of the institutionalization process. What we have to understand is that the experience in Senegal can be divided in 3 periods. First of all, we had a period between 1950 and 1970 that you can describe as the techno approach, the technological era, where the objective was really to work on the protein gaps. This was the technological approach where we try to see how we can fill the gaps in terms of proteins amongst our people. There's another period which is important. It's from 1970 to 2000. We were in a rather difficult economical situation. This was structural adjustment. The CFA franc was devaluated. So we had a project per project approach with the implementation of projects such as the communal nutritional project. And since 2000, now we have a more proactive approach with the development, with the ratification of the OMBs by Senegal. And we have more of a programmatic approach to solve the nutrition problems for our people. The institutionalization process can be seen under the institutional anchorage. Between 1950 and 1970, there was no institutional anchorage. This anchorage started really in 1995 with our community nutritional project, and there was a national commission to fight malnutrition that was set up, and that was under the presidency, and its role was to ensure the management of a community management project. And Senegal learned lessons from this. Starting 2000, the president of our republic set up this cell to fight against malnutrition, which now is under the Prime Minister's office to cover other sectors to fight malnutrition. So this institutional anchorage, there's the departure point, which is 1995. In terms of the nutritional policy, it really started to flower in 2000 with the development of a policy pro-nutrition, a strategic plan, and moreover the different sectorial policy letters. In terms of prioritization as well, nutrition truly became a priority for our government starting in 2000 with the registration of nutrition and reference documents and political, social, economic documents to reduce poverty. And the most important point was a budget line for funding via the government of Senegal of nutrition, and this started in 2000. So if you see really the different characteristics of an institutionalization, it really started in 1995, so over more than a decade ago. But how did we arrive? How did we manage after 15 years of institutionalization? How did we manage to get at this very high level in Senegal? We should remind you of the context between 95 and 2001. I'll remind you that during this period we experienced the devaluation of the CFA franc in 1993, and this devaluation was coupled with the structural adjustment plan, so the government was in a situation that was difficult. From an economic stand, the risks for the government, we see children that are poorly nourished in newspapers, and they showed that there was a certain famine throughout the land. There was another challenge in cities. The government was fearful in terms of youthful employment. With this devaluation of the CFA franc, there was a risk of unemployment rising and tension in urban areas, and that is where that the government focused on different nutritional aspects, and a solution was favored to respond to those two objectives: improve the nutritional situation and employ the young. Hence, the community project. So it employs young people that were regrouped in interest groups, and these young people, the GIE, that managed these community centers. So the objective was double. We created employments, and we were handling children's growth. So we realized during this period nutrition was designated as a solution to get out of the crisis. All this was pushed forth by leaders. It's important to to have strong leadership for nutrition. In terms of the bank, the World Bank supported that project. The leadership was quite robust. In Senegal as well, there was strong leadership to suggest to the government a solution, a concrete solution that revolved around a community nutrition project with different activities in urban areas to solve unemployment and solve the nutrition issue. So we will retain this. This was really in a specific context, devaluation of the currency, and we had to find measures to minimize structural adjustment. Now, in 2001, we find ourselves in a different situation. Senegal had went through a political change, and there was the ratification at a national level of the MDGs, and this is a precise, specific objective, and this is a priority for the development of countries. So the project that just ended was identified as a success story. In Senegal as well, we had to come up with a new response adapted to the new context during this period. Hence, the political will, which had to strive to place nutrition amongst the priorities of the country. But the major change that took place in that period is the different approach. We went from a project approach to a programmatic approach. With the evolution of thought, we felt that we had to provide a multisectorial response towards nutrition. This explains the change in terms of the institutional anchorage to go from the presidency to the prime minister's office. To coordinate a multisectorial response, it's better to be within the government, the executive under the prime minister, who leads the other ministries in the country. This explains going from the presidency to the prime ministership. At that time as well, the different advocacy was of the experts played a key role. We were able to convince the government in terms of the new response that we wanted to give. This is the multisectorial approach and the anchorage within the Prime Minister's office, and also a strong support from the World Bank that we enjoyed during this period, because if we tabulate things, the World Bank has invested since 1995, 15 years ago, so there needs to be continuity in the support, and this duration is a process to reach maturity in terms of the institutionalization of nutrition. What are the advantages and the risks for this anchorage? The advantages, the political ownership, when it's the Prime Minister's office or the presidency, the other sectors will be more favorable to dialogue and collaboration in terms of efficiency. It also facilitates the insertion of nutrition in sectorial areas. We also have the mobilization of resources allocated to resources, facilitated the fact that it depends on the Prime Minister's office, and it facilitates the coordination between the different sectors, and nutrition then becomes more attractive to other development partners. We have experienced this at the beginning. We only had the World Bank as a partner, but as time went by, we were able to get UNICEF to come on board, which help us more. The CANE, HK, a lot of partners, which increasingly are coming towards us thanks to our anchorage. But there are risks. We should mention them as well. First of all, the first one, the change of there can be a change of orientation of the government because a different political party can come to power. This is a risk that you have to bear in mind, that one must monitor so as to anticipate if there's a political change, that the institutional anchorage should not change. It can go from the prime ministership to another ministry. There can be resistance from different sectors which traditionally tackle nutrition, they can resist. There too, we have to take this change into account, this risk into account, and how to get them on board so as to avoid that resistance and this clash. Moreover, there is the risk in terms of the different sectors, the Paris Declaration, which favors reinforcing different traditional sectors to implement the different policies. Today, in terms of ACLM, we're not considered a sector, a specific sector. We are more like a freewheeling sector, and that goes against the Paris Declaration. What we need in the people must take into account how specific nutrition is. Nutrition must be at a very high level, but also needs a certain flexibility. Nutrition to depend on one sector is rather difficult in our context in Senegal because we need a coordination of these different sectors. What do we learn from this experience? The emergency situation was critical in our experience because if you recall, 1993 it was an emergency. The devaluation of our currency, structural adjustment. The government was scared of the consequences and reacted. The other point that we can retain is leadership. Nutrient needs its champions. We have had champions in Senegal for nutrition, and at the World Bank, I will not name names, but all those who worked at the World Bank in the area of nutrition and who also worked in Senegal were able to develop a team spirit with the Senegalese, and this is a mark of leadership that one should underscore. In terms of the government, there was a very strong leadership. They were very receptive to the proposals that were tendered to improve the situation in Senegal, and they got on board. The government always respected its commitments in terms of the investments, in terms of nutrition. That should be not forgotten. The leaders, the champions of nutrition, must also fight so that nutrition be part and parcel of the central issues when you talk about development. Today in Senegal, when we draft our policies in terms of development, social, political development, nutrition is clearly defined. The priorities come out in these reference documents for the country, and we have to come up with a solution which is concrete to draw the attention and to keep the attention of the decision makers. There are limitations for this duplication. This applies also to Senegal. What we presented was specific to Senegal. Every country has its own realities. I don't think there are no ideal positions where nutrition is concerned. You can't say it should be the Prime Minister, the President, or the Ministry of Agriculture. The thing is to find the prism through which you can mobilize the players. Who is in this country? What is the ideal niche for nutrition so as to mobilize resources and to reinforce everyone's accountability? I think that is what we can retain in terms of the institutionalization, knowing that we can, between countries, exchange in terms of institutionalizations, what are our challenges, and share our ideas so as to find for each country the ideal spot for nutrition. Now, in terms of the implementation platform, if we explore, when we're talking about an implementation platform for nutrition, I think it's important to discuss the technical ministries, the different sectors that tackle the different aspects of nutrition throughout the country. What is their position in terms of the implementation platform? If you see the participation of these technical ministry, we see through different periods that I described earlier. It's since 2000 that we have a true participation of the technical ministries in terms of CLM, the Ministry of Health, all the technical ministries play a part fighting malnutrition. So we have that since 2000 in Senegal. We have the participation of local communities. And these local communities actually are the masters of the different projects that are implemented at a local level. The other important point as well is the participation of civil society. In Senegal, we started in 2000 to have a network of NGOs which develop nutrition activities at a community level. And the final point is the participation of the private sector. And since 2000, we have this participation in terms of fortification. How did we manage to get these different actors on board, the technical ministries, to get them on board? It's through the norms of the protocol on nutrition according to sectors. For instance, health sector will develop everything that's standards and protocol in terms of taking care of acute malnutrition, will develop the norms and the protocols in terms of supplements of vitamin A. The Ministry of Industry will have to give norms and protocol for strengthening food. The Ministry of Commerce to the compliance of this strengthening of the in terms of oil that contain vitamin A, be it salt or iron. Different players are playing different roles. The nutrition is integrated in these different policies of these different sectors. And these different sectors, every ministry, will develop different actions both locally and nationally. For instance, the Ministry of Health is responsible to ensure everything that vitamin A supplements. The Ministry of Industry will take care of everything that is strengthening of dialogue with the private sector to fortify foods. And the Ministry of National Education will tackle nutrition in curriculum. So every ministry plays a very specific part, and it will have to play it through the land. Now, the involvement of local communities, this is considered as a window of opportunity for nutrition, because in Senegal there is a policy to decentralize. Nutrition can be considered as something that can be transferred. So local communities that are responsible for development at a local level are responsible of everything to ensure a satisfactory nutritional level for the people that have elected them. So it's been perceived as an opportunity to integrate nutrition within these local policies in local plans for development to ensure an ownership and an accountability in terms of nutrition on the peripheral level. These local communities also are responsible to participate in the funding of nutrition in their different locations, and they're also empowered for follow-up and social involvement. The most important point in terms of our platform, of our implementation platform, it ensures the deep anchorage of these activities. In Senegal, we have horizontal structures, NGOs, and these are implementation structures. The important point that we have here, that these NGOs were selected by the different players, the different stakeholders. People showed interest. We had a competition actually for every NGO had to compete for a certain zone of intervention with criteria to respect. And the NGOs that were competing were assessed at a local level, at a regional level by a committee all the different stakeholders, those are the ones who selected these NGOs according to very well-defined criteria through a process where transparency, equity, and efficiency were premium. Once these NGOs were selected, there was a contractualization with contracting of these NGOs with local communities. Let me remind you that the local communities are considered as implementers of these projects. The local communities are in charge of development of their own locations. So these local communities contract with NGOs so as to ensure the implementation of these specific interventions and adapted to the local context. What we retain the lesson that we should not have a single approach in terms of implementation of interventions. Every community has its own reality. In Senegal, we have retained this lesson of the PNC, the Community Nutrition Project between 95 and 2000. It was just one size fits all. And we realize that every intervention must be adapted to the realities on the ground. And that is why today the location, the people in charge contract with the NGO that is responsible to implement the nutrition actions on the ground. More then, we got the private sector to get on board so as to play a social role. The dialogue with this private sector to implement the norms in terms of fortifying the food, we came out with a decree which makes oil and flour mandatory. We have a support program for the different industrialists to ensure the fortifying of these different foods. What do we retain from this platform? You can see with the institutional format, we have a platform that enables us to ensure a coordination at a national and local levels. You saw earlier that we are present throughout the country, and in every area, every region, we have in place a committee responsible to coordinate all the different nutrition interventions within that country. So it's also under the authority of the government. Moreover, at the national level, we have the ministries, member of the CLM, but at the operational level, they are also member of regional committees that ensures monitoring the implementation of these interventions. In terms of coordination, the structure enables us to facilitate coordination dialogue between the different players. This enables us also to reinforce accountability, because as we say in English, accountability, it's very important. For each objective, for each challenge, we should be able to identify who is accountable, who's responsible. You can say that if it's in terms of implementation of nutrition community-based activities, it is the local communities, the NGOs are accountable for that. We can identify clearly that the Ministry of Health, this health sector, is responsible to monitor the application of norms at a community level. We can identify the responsibility of the Ministry of Industry in terms of fortifying the foods, Ministry of Education as well. Each entity must clearly identify its responsibilities and follow up. The other point that I wanted to raise, this pattern enables us, makes decentralization easier. We've implemented a system that enables us to planify at all levels. To plan, the most important level is the local planning level. Planning at a local level, planning according to the realities on the ground, and particularly to ensure a management based on results from the local level to the national level. This design is not applicable everywhere. It is far from perfect. We're still pondering, seeing how we can improve it in terms of the challenges we face, but there are limitations in terms of the duplication of this design, because not every country wants to decentralize. The states very often want to maintain power, so decentralization is not to be taken for granted. Moreover, the presence of horizontal structures, NGOs, and we're fortunate in Senegal to have NGOs like Child Fund that are present at the national and international levels. I would say that the majority of the international NGOs are present in Senegal. Why? Because of the context of Senegal's history. Senegal is a destination for a lot of partners, and that really characterizes Senegal. You do not find this necessarily elsewhere, but in Senegal as well, we had the luck to have NGOs that are very representative, that are present throughout the land. In each district, each health district, you'll find an NGO at the local level, so we're very lucky in that regard. But this design, the other limitation rather, it requires a constant financial support to maintain the system in place. There are a lot of actors. We have 18 NGOs currently, and we cover over 1 million children under the age of 5 for nutritional services at the community level. We have over 4 million community agents, 4,000 rather, present in the 230 rural communities that we have. So this is a huge machine, and we really need huge funding and consistently to maintain in place our system. In terms of perspective, we've seen somewhat where we've traveled through what we can retain. We've learned something that is very important. The different crises that we've experienced in 2008, then 2008, 2009, with the increase of prices, this really showed us that everything that we have acquired is good, but it's still very fragile, and it's necessary to continue to build and consolidate what we've acquired, because the game is not over yet. So we have challenges, first of all, in terms of our system and in terms of the results. We have to strengthen our system and the results. How? First of all, we talked about accountability, empowerment of the actors. We're on our way, but there's the light at the end of the tunnel is still remote. We have to strengthen local communities. Nutrition must be a priority in their development plan. They have a clear idea in terms of the investment that they must implement and the financial support, the funds that they have to raise to fund the different nutrition interventions. The game is far from over. We're still in a dynamic to find the funds, to mobilize these funds at a local level, raise funds for a local level. The technical ministries, moreover, very often nutrition, quote unquote, is relinquished to the side. So if you take the Ministry of Health, where there are other priorities linked to AIDS or malaria, nutrition has a visibility problem within the ministry. So there's still work to be done so that nutrition within the ministries becomes a priority, and that this priority, this order priority, must take place via the funding of activities. That is a challenge to be met.
In the private sector as well, we need to do lots of things with regards to accountability. The private sector, if we are talking about micronutrients, for example, it's very important that we work together with the private sector, for example, to enrich the biscuits to make it so that the most vulnerable people have the possibility to have access to this food, enriched food. We have to adapt us to the ever-changing world because we have a decentralization in Senegal. So every time when we have a different context, we have to try to get the opportunity and try to reinforce this system, the implementation in the sector. So we talked about the roles of the CLMs. The CLM is a catalyst. It catalyzes the energy, all the energy which is needed for nutrition. So CLM needs stability. One of the challenges is to make sure that CLM is stable. And then the multisectoriality, that's another big challenge. Our responsibility is to have a strategic document which is much more inclusive than the one we have. We're talking a lot about the multisectoral sector, but the different sectors, they need to have some dialogue somewhere. They need to find each other. We have strategic plan in our country for 5 years where the Agricultural Ministry can identify clearly what are the priorities of nutrition in Senegal, who is linked to the role and the accountability of the sector. But it is better to dialogue and then make sure that the measures which have been identified are implemented. We need a document which can integrate the role of these different sectors. Right now, we work on this document. We also need to reinforce the dialogue among the stakeholders so that there is some synergy on the local level. Because sometimes we have some stakeholders who act, how could I say, they work parallelly, but they do not have the possibility to get together and to come to an agreement on key questions. We have to have way more efficient mechanisms in place so that we can take in account the priorities which were defined for every zone, for every locality, and so that every sector knows which role to assume. This is very different, that it is very difficult. We need this synergy. And obviously, for the multisectoral activities, we need more resources so that we can act upon lacks of nutrition. Of course, schooling, education, agriculture, development, for example, of a garden so that everybody could have their own garden adapted to the context. Literacy, it's very important. We need to reinforce the subject of nutrition at the school level. We need to develop more and more pro-nutritional activities. Through our experience, we concentrated more on specific pro-nutrition programs so that we can fight malnutrition. We need also be able to develop in those same intervention zones. We need to define the lack and then counteract. So reinforcement of a CLM, very important structure, because it is in charge of nutrition, and it needs to be ready to interfere directly if there is an emergency, if it has to do with an economic link, if it is linked to environmental changes. All these different changes will have an impact on the nutrition situation. So CLM needs to be able to anticipate these problems so that they can meet the challenge in case an emergency comes up, because these situations will have an impact on the nutritional situation in the country. So for this, we need to reinforce our capacities. We need to be open to the other sectors. We need to be open to meet challenges so that we will have the response in place before the emergency comes up. And what is the most important if we are talking about scaling and maintaining the assets which we have is the financial aspect. You know that in Senegal we had an interesting evolution with regard to the contribution of the government. In 2000 and 2002, it was about 0.13 million of dollars per year, but in 2013 we are going to go to 7.2 million dollars a year, and this is huge. The challenge we have is to mobilize every year the resources which are earmarked for nutrition. In order to mobilize the resources of the government, it is done by competition. You have other sectors, for example, agriculture, education. All these departments have their priorities. So the amount which we have on the balance sheet, there is competition in order to get some of the numbers. So this is advocacy we have to do before the different departments, before the Prime Minister. We have to mobilize these resources. And that what we can show them are the results in order to get more support, in order to get the respect of the deciding parties, is to show results. And if the deciders know that and see that you are a structure who is believable and who has a transparent management of the funds in place, which is audited on a regular basis, which has great results, a clear impact, then generally speaking, up to this point, because of these different aspects, we were able to mobilize the funds we needed. So it is definitely also a challenge for us to maintain the bar at this level in order to get these funds to ensure the scaling of nutrition, because this makes part of our next challenge. We would like to reinforce the Sun movement in Senegal, and in order to strengthen the Sun movement in Senegal, it is extremely important to intensify the involvement of the partners. In September, we had this encounter in New York, this conference, and what we retain in Senegal is that we have to have more dialogue between the stakeholders, between the partners. We need to have structures with these partners. If you take, for example, a structure like the World Bank, in order to reinforce the Sun movement, we need to get at one table the people who are responsible for nutrition in Senegal, also the partners of the World Bank, the partners of these other structures, so that we could have more synergy. Because this way we see from where the major responses have to come. There are different problems which are linked, for example, to the Department of Education. So we need to have the partners who work in education to come and help us and to help us out. The different sectors need to meet at one table so that they can have a dialogue. More partners that are able to dialogue, more partners also who are able to finance, so that we have the resources we need. We need to reinforce the accountability of the partners, of the stakeholders. The other big problem is the evaluation. We really need to be able to monitor and we need to be able to give evaluations on the nutrition situation, and we have to do this with timeliness. In Senegal, we have the ODS. Those are audits which are done every 5 years, and that is not enough. We need surveys which happen at least twice a year or every 2 years, so that we could get a good knowledge of the nutritional situation in the situation. So we have to do these surveys at least every 2 years, national surveys, to specify what is the nutritional situation of the country, because in order to report, we also have to report about the impact. In order to mobilize resources of the government, you have to be able to identify within Senegal where are the priority zones and what is the nature of these problems. So we need to reinforce our system with regards to monitoring and interventions, evaluation of the interventions. The departments need to be involved so that we can define the strategies and adapt them to our problems. We cannot copy a plan from one region and then use it in the next. No, you have to identify the problems zone by zone and then reinforce the multisectoral platforms. That's what we were just talking about. I thank you very much for listening.